Thanks to the Mumbai International Film Festival for a series of masterclasses and in-conversation sessions. Our gratitude goes to the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, the National Films Development Corporation, the National Film Archive of India, alongside the Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute, Kolkata. A big thank you to everyone who made this possible. This evening, we are peeling back the layers of a crime thriller with an exclusive look at Poacher. We are honored to have with us Mr. Richie Mehta, an Emmy Award-winning director, who will share his journey from script to screen. He'll reveal his storytelling style and discuss Poacher, a drama that exposes a major ivory poaching ring in India. Now, can we please welcome Mr. Richie Mehta on stage with a huge round of applause. Our moderator is none other than Ms. Rohini Ramanathan, an award-winning radio personality known for her engaging voice and style. Please welcome Mr. Rohini Ramanathan to the stage with another round of applause. We'll also invite your questions after the discussion, so be ready to join in. I would now request Mr. Prithul Kumar, Joint Secretary Broadcasting, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting and Managing Director of NFTC to felicitate our guest. Thank you, Mr. Prithul Kumar. I would now request Ms. Rohini to start the session.
Thank you so much. Before we've done any work, we've already got our rewards. This is quite nice. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Let me set the context for today's chat a little bit. I'm Rotox, or Rohini, and it's a privilege to be representing Prime Video at the 18th edition of the Mumbai International Film Festival and to host this conversation with one of my favorite creators, Richie Mehta. A round of applause, please. Richie, I must take a couple of minutes to just do some tarif, and if you'll allow me. Yeah. Poacher, how many of us already Poacher fans? How lovely, how lovely. So for the rest of us, of course, let me tell you, it's a crime drama based on true events. It's a captivating narrative, and it's been so wonderful since it dropped. I think a lot of us got a little more aware of the environments that we live in, the worlds that we inhabit, and what we need to do to make this better. It's produced by the distinguished Oscar-winning QC Entertainment, and here we have an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker, a multifaceted global cinema icon, producer and entrepreneur. Alia Bhatt, of course, putting her might behind it with her venture Eternal Sunshine Productions, serves as the executive producer. Of course, if you're fans of Nimisha, Roshan, Dibyendu, you want to give them a round of applause as well because they're absolutely stellar. And for those who haven't yet discovered the show, I would urge you after the session to kindly go to Prime Video and binge watch it because it makes for a great Sunday, all right? So at the end of it, you might be a little, I was left wondering how I could do something about this. And I think that's probably that's why we're doing this chat today. So I'm going to ask you straight up, I remember you made a vada, to a WTI officer, which is an officer of the Wildlife Trust of India, saying that when I find time, I'm going to come back and dive into this research a little bit, and I will give it the justice it deserves. I don't know if you know this story, but Richie was making, like a documentary at that point, and he'd crowdsourced footage from India, all across India. It was India in a day. One of the pieces of footage that he received was the ivory, sort of bust that happened. And he saw that clip, and then he decided to pull the proverbial elephant by its tail, and then he realized that, bhai, iske piche to pura haathi chhapa hai. So let's go back to that vada that you made to the WTI officer. What put you on this path?
Thank you very much. And first of all, before I speak, I just want to acknowledge we have a lot of some of our cast and crew actually here around for Poacher who are experts in what they do, and I just want to give them a round of applause. And don't worry, I won't embarrass you. So you described it exactly right. When I encountered that ivory footage, that raid, the footage of a raid, I was at that point doing India in a day, and I was writing Delhi Crime at the time. And I was so fascinated by this because I didn't realize this was a big issue, such a big issue that there was a protocol for raids, for wildlife contraband. So when I saw the way that the footage was unfolding, I could see that people were actually acting according to a protocol, which means this happens all the time. And as we all know, without getting into controversy, we live in a very polarizing world. Sometimes it's very difficult for us to express our opinions on a certain topic when we're desperate to speak to others about it. And this was an issue which is non-polarizing. Nobody wants to see an elephant shot in the head. So I felt, and there are controversies, of course, if you're paying attention to a human-wildlife conflict, but nobody wants to see an elephant shot in the head. And neither do I. And so I saw this, and I said, there's an industry around this. There are people who seem to be working tirelessly. They didn't look like they were in the best of health when they were doing this raid, which means they've probably been up for days and days and days and months. I learned when I called WTI, of which actually Ananya, so here, she was part of WTI at the time, they told me it was the end of a 1-year investigation, between 9 months and a year investigation. I said, how is that possible that you spent 1 year every day working on an elephant poaching case? What does that mean? And when they described some of the basic details to me, I just found the human drama of it very compelling. And obviously, we're not making series or films for elephants. It has to be made for human beings, and human beings are in a position where we can wipe out the species if we think about it. So I was very moved by what these people were doing. And if you've seen Delhi Crime, you see that's something that's very important to me, especially as a non-resident Indian filmmaker. It's very low-hanging fruit for someone like me to observe a problem in India and then come and highlight that problem. I think it's bullshit, actually, because that's not my right to do that. I'm benefiting as an NRI off generations of hard work and sacrifice in an environment like Canada, where I just set my sights on something and I can go achieve it. And so for me, I feel like I owe it to this place to give back. Now, if I can take stories where the world has a certain prejudice against India and turn it on its head to show the best of humanity, I'll do that. That's what Delhi Crime was, and that's what Poacher was.
For those who watch the series, I'll give you an example because you might be able to, immediately latch onto what I'm coming to. Neil Banerjee, tells Roshan's character, every time you come to meet me, please bring a file and it has to have some turtle stuff on it. It's just one of those little things that I think go a long way in telling us how much detail and how much research must have gone in. You love this. You love it, right? And today, since we're at MIFF and it's about documentary and celebrating documentary, let's do this in two parts. One is the amount of research, and the second part is how do you take all of this research and then find the drama?
For me, my favorite part of the process is research. So, because you're getting to know people who are really remarkable, you're getting to see stories which really are quite flabbergasting. And that's when I learn about everything. So if a project does emerge from it, by the time it gets to the market and people view it, what they are experiencing when they watch it, whether you watch it on a Sunday night or not, I've gone through that experience now. So when I was shooting Deadly Crime and our crew was enduring the production experience and going through their own issues, I had already gone through it during research for years. Same thing with Poacher. So I just get interested as a human being to learn more. And I live this is a very practical, I live a very simple life with not a lot of bells and whistles. So it's a very low overhead life, which means I can afford pockets of time where I can just go explore things. For example, the turtle point you made was this ex-raw agent, essentially, who's on this case. He loves turtles. But his whole thing was, if anyone sees you coming to speak to me often, they're going to assume we're working on a case. I just want them to think you're bringing me turtle documents, because everyone I work with knows I love turtles. So it's actually part of their clandestine operation. I just thought it was very funny, and very interesting, and it's a nice detail. And in fact, I don't know if Smriti's here, our costume designer, but she actually hand-stitched turtle details into Neil's costume, whether you see it or not. This stuff permeates, and I think whether you see it or not, you will perceive those kinds of things. And from a documentary standpoint, I actually believe a series like Poacher is more accurate than a doc version of it would have been, because most of the people I speak to don't want to be on camera. But they have no problem with me handwriting. My shorthand has now become very, very quick. So I get reams of information from them, and I tell them before they speak that if I'm going to use this for something, I will come to you and make sure it doesn't hurt your endeavor, because you're the one trying to do it. I'm just trying to represent you. And secondly, I also say, I'm not just in this to blast your amazing story to the world. How can this help you? How can it benefit you? So who are we going after, and why, and what do we gear this towards? So it becomes a collaboration between the communication industry and the people who are out there really making the world a better place.
I remember that, very recently, Richie, you are no stranger to awards, but one of my favorite awards that was given to you was called the Tech Not Terror Award. We'll get to that, and it was, of course, given to you by PETA, and that's because of Poacher, right? But before we get to why you got that award, let's tell the audience here that if you look closely, and I think that I wish I was in your audience, in your place right now after this session, and if I'm ever going to watch Poacher for the first time, because one of my favorite, the most delightful thing is, it's full of animals. And I think that that's something that is just a philosophy. There are scenes, there are entire sequences that start with one of these animals, and it's not just elephants, right? So there's birds, there's monkeys, they're in Delhi, they're in the jungle, and I keep seeing them, and it was almost like I was playing a game of how many animals can you spot in this episode? So when we spoke about it, you said, that's why the Tech Not Terror Award came to you. But my question was, initially, how did you make them act for you?
I didn't. That man did, and his team, Jatin, at MPC, and I think there's a whole, I can't see, there's a whole gang here. At MPC, and then Nishan Chan and the whole team. And that, for me, was very important to obviously not use real animals. I'm not going to ruin this for you when I say it's the first 2 minutes you see an elephant get assassinated in the series, and the idea is that these are things that no human eyes have ever seen unless you're the one pulling the trigger.
You know, you spoke about using the elephant and the poaching itself at the start of every episode. I mean, it starts with that. I'm sorry, you know, we're giving you a couple of spoilers here, but and you keep coming back at the beginning of every episode to what happens to that animal. Why was that important for you?
So the prologue of most of the episodes is the elephant carcass. So it's shot in the first episode, and then 2, 3, 4, we come back to different levels of degeneration. And I thought that we've seen series and films about crime scenes, human crime scenes, but we've never seen one about an animal crime scene. And to see how the natural world reacts to that, because the natural world recycles. So on the one hand, there are documented instances of animals, charismatic species encountering unnatural deaths of other charismatic species in the jungle and not knowing what they're seeing, because that animal was killed by a human being and they don't understand it because it's not natural. So it's kind of scrambles their circuits and their understanding of the world. And then you have creatures like maggots. And maggots, for example, which we created, one of the species we created, you'd never know, but they've been created, have a very crucial function in our ecosystem. They, in my view, they contribute more to the well-being of Earth than we do. So I think it's very important to show that, on the one hand, this is an unnatural incident. On the other hand, the jungle can't do anything but fully recycle. And there's something amazing about that complexity.
It's at points it was very hard to watch, I'll be honest, especially when, as an audience, you're looking at how the ivory is extracted. And I can imagine, as an audience, if we're looking at this and this is a fictionalized version, at some point you might have heard or seen the truth. So I want to ask you, while actually making this fiction out of this fact, how much did you keep or choose to keep, and how do you make those choices? What stays, what goes?
You mean as I'm writing, essentially? I mean, look, they handed me the story as I spoke to them over several months. And when I say speak to them, it's, you know, it's the same thing with Delhi crime. You go meet somebody in this field, they're way too busy to talk to me. So they'll meet me for 5 minutes at a train station, and then at the last minute say, hey, you want to get on the train with me? I say, where are you going? Well, it's a 2-day ride. All right. So then I sit with them for 2 days. And then in that train, and I don't know where we end up, but I just learn about them. And then they start telling me things, and what's interesting is it's mundane to them, and it's incredible to me, I think. So for example, there was a character Roshan plays when he told me an incident. I was asking about their personal life once I get to know them. And then he said, oh, at the time, my wife doesn't know what I do. I said, how is it possible that you're doing wildlife crime fighting and your wife doesn't know what you do? And then he said, well, she thinks I'm a photographer and I build websites, blah, blah, blah. And I said, so did this particular case clash with that? And he said, and he told me about this wedding incident where he had to go to this wedding and then he ran out and kidnapped somebody and then came back. And I said, this is so crazy. You guys are doing this in the name of species preservation. I've never heard anything like it. And when they tell me it the first time, I can see the scene. So then I start to build episodes around certain scenes and sequences and what I call super sequences, because they're so big. And I can start to see climactic points. Like there's an incident in Delhi airport where they're trying to get a poacher out and a dealer. And if you haven't seen it, it's it's so weird, I could not have made it up. But you see it happening, and we tried to shoot it in a manner that if we've all probably been to airports, this could be happening right beside you, and you're not aware that somebody is being marched in a very quiet way. A prisoner transfer is happening. So I just thought it's so fascinating to me at so many levels, which is why to me it justifies a 6.5-hour running time.
Of course, there are moments that will never leave me. There is little detail where, you know, while there is a scene where, you know, the ivory poaching comes to that point when the ivory is going to be extracted. And there's this horrific detail where he tells him, you have to lift, you know, the trunk. And, you know, everybody knows dead weight. And when it's an elephant's dead weight, I don't know how you can be in any position as a human being to lift a dead elephant's trunk. It's horrific. And there are details like this that never leave you. How do you recover from something like this? Do you have any downtime? Does it stay with you forever? I'm asking from a place of concern, really.
I don't generally have a lot of downtime, but I think when I learn about these things, when I ask them how the ivory is extracted and they describe it to me, and this was described to me by Poacher, who is now no longer alive. And he himself was sickened by it. It's the character of Aruku, if you've seen the show. He was just, the real person was describing to me, and he was sickened by it. And so I just kind of, again, I think that no one has ever seen this, and I think it's important, as opposed to Delhi crime, where the crime must never be shown, because we don't need to show it, that this is a crime that has to be shown. And it has to be shown like a construction site, because to them that's what it is. They're literally just moving beams around and pieces of wood and pulling things apart and hammering. It's that kind of, the discussion is done as if they're two construction workers. And for them it's very nonchalant. And one of the greatest rewards of the release of the series was the amount of people that contacted me saying, I didn't know my grandmother's churi was. That's how that happened. I didn't know that. You know, things like that. People are saying my mother, my grandmother, my parents, my father, they have ivory tidbits I didn't know. You know, it's amazing. I was watching a film recently, which is a really problematic film. It's called Out of Africa with Robert Redford, if you've ever seen it. And Meryl Streep, big Oscar winning. He's an elephant poacher in the film. There's a scene, he shows up to see Meryl Streep and he's got two big tusks. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is mid-80s. It was still accepted from a media standpoint that we could do that. Imagine your hero in a romantic epic drama is a serial killer. And it's Robert Redford, and it's fine. And so I'm just amazed that this kind of stuff to me, that narrative needs to alter, and it is over time.
You know, 3 casting choices I'm very curious about. Actually, not curious when you know them, you know their work, and then when you watch them in Poacher. But a big shout out to Nimisha, Roshan, and Dibyendu. I think they were phenomenal and understated and served the role and the story so much more than themselves. Are those qualities important for making something like Poacher?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I can see we have Mr. Denzel Smith here, who, you know, he comes in for two, 3 scenes. The first 2 he doesn't speak. He says one word in the second scene he's there. And then he has the big speech. And for him to come and to graciously come down to Kerala and do these things, it is everyone involved is doing it for what we believe could be needle moving, for sure. And at the same time, as a result, what I never want to do is work on a project that we all think can maybe make the world a better place and step on people while we're doing it. So it has to be, it's very important for me it's a very relaxed and pleasant environment, because that's when you get everyone thinking and feeling it. And to hold that together for a prolonged period, it's not easy, but it's certainly much easier when everyone is doing it. You know, I could see my supervising producer, Abhijit, there, who was the problem solver. You know, when the toilet didn't show up, he was the one who was going to get it, and that is absolutely part of this whole thing.
Let's talk about, you know, the fact that it's in more languages than one. As someone who can understand a bit of Malayalam, I was very excited that I could watch it in Malayalam and read off the subtitles. And then, of course, I had the opportunity to rewatch it, because you don't just show up at the MIFF, you know, festival. You have to do a little bit of homework. And this time around, I said, you know what, let me watch it in Hindi. And I had the experience of watching it in Hindi. So because I've watched in both languages, I just felt that it was as nuanced as it was in Malayalam. Maybe because I'm a little more biased with the language, I thought it was sweeter to listen to in Malayalam. But for you, you know, how easy was it for you to actually direct the series, you know, in multiple languages? There's Malayalam, there's Hindi, and there's English, right?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was a really learning experience for me to direct in a language I don't understand. And again, I had help. Parinaz is here somewhere, who was instrumental in making it's about quality checks. Because what I would do is I wrote in English, and I don't know if Supro or Amrita are here, who did my Hindi and Bengali as well, I'm not sure. So I write in English, and then we do the translations, and then we would get somebody else who has not read the English to review those translations raw and translate it back to English to see what was lost. Because a script like this is legally insured before we go into production, because it's a real case and there are real people involved. And so what I've researched and written in certain cases, in certain moments, is verbatim what was told to me. In certain cases, there were bail hearings, for example, where I got transcripts for that. So we can't deviate. And Malayalam is a very beautiful, interesting, poetic language, and the difference between English and Malayalam is they're different planets almost. So I had to make sure that what I had written was as accurately translated as possible. And then on set, I can't tell if an actor is changing it slightly. So we just had a system of being at the monitor, and Buddy would hold the iPad, and she would just scroll through as I'm directing a scene, and I would see the left side is English, the right side is Malayalam. I know where they are in the scene. They're emoting in a manner that is realistic to me. And then in post-production, we would see if we lost anything. But there were so many interesting moments. For example, I'd written, it was 8 to 10, right, Buddy? 8 to 10 doesn't exist in Malayalam. You can't say 8 to 10 days in Malayalam, for anyone here who speaks Malayalam. And I was flabbergasted. I'm like, what? Why can't you just put two numbers together with a dash in between? And they're like, no, it just doesn't happen. And the explanation I got was by somebody, which, whether it's true or not, maybe some king 1,000 years ago didn't like the 8 to 10 combination that was presented to him, and he outlawed it. And that's it. You can say 7 to 10, 7 to 9, 9 to 11. 8 to 10 doesn't exist. And so this was every day, 10 times a day. And it's fascinating. I mean, it's amazing to me. So that exploration of language is there's a whole other series or film happening there.
Fascinating, for sure. I remember when we were at the trailer launch, and there's Aditi here, there's Sonia here. I remember the actors, talking to us about spending time in the jungle, the first time. And they were like, this man really enjoys putting us with leeches.
I feel bad for the leeches that they have to, we have to get rid of them.
But it does sensitize you as an audience, and I must say that before we open the floor for questions, that even when I was watching it, at the end of it, I just felt, what can I do, Was that what you wanted to do with this show? Like, get us all to be a little more aware, conscious?
I have to be honest, that's the secondary goal of this. Look, there's a wonderful thing that Amazon, for the first time ever, did, which was put a QR code at the end of every episode. You can donate directly to Wildlife Trust of India, and that has never happened before. So literally, you just watch the credits at the very end, you could scan it, and this is the work they're doing. All of that was secondary to another goal, which I'm actually not privy to tell you. I can't tell you what that first goal was, which me and the wildlife crime fighters discussed. And a few people here might even know what that is, just by being in the field. And I think it's amazing. And I can tell you we've achieved that first goal. And the second goal of is getting it out there.
We can only guess, I guess, at this point. Lastly, of course, the series has got so much love and adulation from audiences and critics. Can you tell us right now what you're working on?
I'm doing a lot of research into the tiger trade, basically, and big cats trade, to extend potential storytelling that we've started now. But this is a very long-term prospect for me. I have several other projects, but it's very. What I'm trying to do actually is bring together all of the major privatized film industries of the world with conservationists. And what I want to do is take conservation. I want to take storytelling out of the conservationist hands. I don't think it should be their responsibility. They're too busy doing amazing things. And I think everyone in this room, we're in the media industry, and the onus should be on us to take those stories and tell it for them. So that's part of my long-term project, as well as researching about the tiger trade and other things between Central India and China.
Thank you so much, and that was my chat. I know that hands are already up.
The question is, for decades, we were told that the safe subjects for entertainment on film or television were things like sports, sex, crime, and religion. And in India especially, it was said that if you have a drama which addresses these four areas, it is very likely to succeed if it is well made. With films or TV productions or any platform productions like yours, in the last 15 or 20 years, do you see a sea change coming around? Are we likely to push back these four pillars and get into morals and environment and concerns and empathy? What is your feeling?
I think there's a little bit more to it than that, because I think there are a lot more than just four kind of accepted conventions, subjects of storytelling. Much more, I think, within that. But all this to say is, look, I'm not a true crime person. I don't watch true crime shows. There are some films I've seen which I really love, which I've referenced in other interviews. But I'm using true crime as a device to talk about things that otherwise would not be interesting to the audiences I'm going after, because I'm not necessarily making work for people who watch wildlife crime documentaries. They're already serviced enough by amazing doc filmmakers. I'm trying to go after a different audience. So I'm using every trick in the entertainment book to get to them. So personally, I believe it should be entertainment is a means to an end. It's not the end. And that's not to say there are wonderful entertaining projects out there that even I engage in watching, but it's just not something I like to do. So what I do is, personally, I look at what is happening right now, what are the genre conventions, and what is the pacing that people like, and then I'll use those. Because film it's an evolving medium, but there's no purest form of it. I mean, we say 90 minutes to 2 hours is a standard length of a film because Walt Disney decided it was, because he was doing research on children's attention span. So we've picked up so many things over the last 130 years of what a film is, what it does to another person. And I just keep looking at what is the latest trend. So I'm not saying where it's going to go, I just say I watch it and use it.
One question and one suggestion, if you allow me. The question is about, you've displayed all the ivory products collected by these people and the trader. It felt as if there was a lot of sarcasm in that, because it exhibited the vanity of the collectors and no ethics, this thing. Were you trying to be sarcastic, or you just showed it because they were there? There was a beautiful phallus that keeps popping up on the dashboard of the car, carved out of ivory. Was there a kind of message you were sending, or was it just there and you showed it?
I mean, look, that thing is just there. It takes too much time and money and effort to put something just there on screen.
Yeah.
But it is, the phallus you're talking about, for example, I just thought it was shocking and funny. It is funny. It's so shocking it's funny to me that somebody would actually order an erect penis made of ivory. There's so many layers of screwed up there. I don't even know where to start. And I think when you're a wildlife crime fighter and your life is spent in very grim circumstances, like any human being, you're going to look for something that's funny. So even when they found it, it was funny. And I said, well, anything I can infuse which makes our journey into this ordeal as a viewer, and certainly their journey, I'm going to harness.
And my observation or suggestion to you was that there was a news this morning that the first elephant overpass was inaugurated today.
Amazing.
Will you make a training manual for elephants to learn to use the overpass?
if they'll watch it. It's amazing, right? Elephants, anytime there's a foreign object in their environment, they'll destroy it. They're so, and it can be camouflaged. They're so acutely aware of what is natural to their environment, what isn't. But certainly, I would say, personally, I would much rather do corporate videos for NGOs of this ilk than make a film I don't like.
Thank you. My question was, directing and writing such a big project, which I'm sure had a very long kind of pre- and post-production process, did you set out with any specific vision or aesthetic that changed throughout the process? And if it didn't, how were you able to hold on to your kind of vision with all these kind of research and people that you worked with?
Sure. My feeling is that we talk about when you put something onto film, it is forever. And if you really think back to the decades, 60s, 50s, whatever industry, whether it's Hollywood or India, we're only remembering a handful of films from those eras that everyone's always talking about. And there's hundreds and thousands of others that didn't really make the cut. And to me, the thing that makes a film or a series or something immortal is very simple. It's a good script and good acting. Everything else, because those things can't be fudged. And if you have that, it will last the test of time because technology will evolve, the style of storytelling will evolve. The one thing that has never ever changed is if it's a good script and good acting, it lasts. You watch movies from the 30s, and they have that, it still works. So the thing I'm very, very anal about is the script. And then beyond that, if I've cast right, and in this case, you know, we had Mukesh Chabra, who was an amazing casting director, and Sanjay was doing a lot of our juniors casting. That after the script is set, I just try and get the right people around me, and then I watch for what doesn't work. Because a million things do. And I just want to see what the playing field is. I am very, very, very lucky, and anyone here who's a director is very lucky when other people put their brains and minds and hearts and souls into achieving your intention. I can't think of a lot of other examples in the world where this happens. So if I'm lucky enough to be with people who are actually thinking and dreaming, using their subconscious to help me, I'm going to allow them as much leeway as possible. And I'll just be there to say, this thing is too much, this is not working, this is not working, this is not. So the aesthetic develops over the course of the project as a result.
I just want to ask you a question in the graph of a filmmaker. And the first question to you is, would you be coming out of this animal genre or whatever, this poaching subjects, and concentrate on human beings? There's vast subjects around the continents. And I perhaps believe that something is gone. And would you be watching with a lens like what happens behind the doors, anatomy of a crime? You personally have engulfed crime into you, or you would be, I presume that you have watched the films around the globe. And are you a serious crime maker? And do you watch behind? I mean, do you look for situations which? I mean, that's your favorite subject?
No, it's not. Crime is not my favorite genre at all. But as I said, I talk about stories I encounter along the way. If I encounter something that's interesting to me, and more importantly, if it's not being serviced, if there's a person out there who's going to make the projects that I'm working on in the manner I feel they should be made, I'm very happy to back off and find another one. There's no shortage of stories in the world that need to be told. I just keep finding that as I go into, for example, the world of wildlife crime, it's unlimited. The amount of human drama, and these are human stories, right? Like I said, the animals are not watching it. They are human stories in my view. But I could tell you right now something, which is, it could really be the worst thing you've ever heard, and I'm not going to because that's not what this is about, that I heard recently from the wildlife space. And it's incomprehensible what human beings are capable of. But then I always look at it and say, wait a sec, there's somebody who stopped that, or is stopping that from happening. What I'm interested in are very, very big stories. Stories that really get to the heart of what we are capable of as a species. My journey is taking me into all different places. I'm very lucky if I get to keep going, to be honest, because I also believe once I have leverage, I gamble it all on something. After Delhi Crime, I had 100 crime stories and military stories coming to me in big budgets and stars. It's like, no, I have leverage. I'm going to use it on wildlife crime, and let's just run it into the ground to see what happens. So I'm a big believer in that, taking that gamble when I'm in that position. So I don't know. I mean, I have 10 projects I'm working on now, different stages, different things. Most of them are not wildlife related. They're certainly human related, and they are very probing in many ways. Also, again, as an NRI, I'm not interested in telling local stories that can be better told by local filmmakers. I'm literally globetrotting and coming here and finding a story and taking it, getting it financed, usually abroad, and then using the apparatus of the industry, which is so considerable here, and the world-class talent to tell these stories. But I'm not, it's not my position to tell stories that don't apply to every human being on the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my question is, how do you go about organizing your writer's room? I mean, are there people specifically working on the research part of it and some other writers specifically dedicated to developing the script?
I've never used a writer's room. I've never worked with other writers on the projects that I've finished. So my first film, I collaborated with my brother. We co-wrote. And beyond that, I've written everything on my own. And of course, that doesn't mean that there's not help later on in terms of translations and dialogue and stuff like that. But I've never worked with a writer's room. I actually don't know how to do that. I'm amazed when the process yields amazing work, and I'm not surprised when it doesn't. I think I've witnessed writers' rooms before, and I find they're slightly dangerous because they're so fun, and it's very easy to lose your way. And then at the end of the week, you come back and you're like, that was the best, most creative time. And then a month later, you look at it and you're like, we're 1 degree off from when we started, and we're in a different part of the world now. So I think personally, I think writers' rooms are most successful with comedy because the intention of comedy is a kind of sophisticated diversion, and that can be irrespective of plot. But I have never been able to. That's not to say I won't one day. I just don't know how. And I love the research and writing so much. I don't want to give that up.
Thank you. That was like my favorite question. We got to know a lot about Richie Mehta because of your question. Person, amazing. Which is why I think we will give you a couple more minutes in case you have any burning questions. Please ask them. Now you can raise your hand, the mic will come to you. Otherwise, as I said, yes, hi. A mic is coming to you. Thank you.
Hi, so my question is, what were your fears when you were writing the script or when you started researching on the subject?
My fear was that I would not be able to fulfill the promise I made to the wildlife crime team. That's the only fear I have.
And what was the promise?
He's not telling.
I can't tell what the specific one was. But, I mean, I remember when Amazon was going to come on board to purchase the series, I went and met with the top brass, and I told them what it was. And they were the last part of that promise. I believe, despite the algorithms that we're dealing with, that, for an earlier question, somewhat dictate what everyone thinks the market wants. I think at the end of the day, the industry is still run by human beings, and if you can find a way to appeal to them and their compassion at any stage, at any level in the industry, you're going to get them to buy in if you make it easy for them. So my fear is just making sure that all the heavy lifting is done based on those promises, adhering to them all the way through the process, which can be sometimes next to impossible, but it helps when you have the team that I have. And then maintaining that by the end of the release, you've still maintained that promise. I did it with people involved with Delhi Crime, I did it now, and I take immense pride in knowing that we took that all the way through, and that is my litmus test for success. It's not reviews or eyeballs.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is, sorry, last chance now, because we're going to run out of time if you have a burning question, and later you don't want to go home and say, I wish I'd asked Richie that. This is your shot. Otherwise, I'm going to do something that we didn't plan on doing, but because you said that there's a lot of people from the making of the series with us, it's so rare to do that. You know, so I want to take a moment to acknowledge everybody in the room who contributed in making this amazing project. It would be amazing if you could stand and take a bow, guys.
Please,
thank you,
please.
each and every one of you. We want to see you. If you were part of Poacher, I would love for you to stand and let us give you a lot of love and respect. Thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you, everyone.
Richie, I'm grateful that your team took out the time to be here. On a Sunday, you took out the time to be here with us. The rest of us, of course, if you haven't watched the show, it's streaming on Amazon Prime in languages.
Sorry, languages?
Languages of your choice.
I just also want to say that one of the real privileges of working on Prime, and I'm not hired by Prime, is the X-ray feature, is their trivia feature. And we went out of our way with Wildlife Trust of India to put together data on every single animal that appears on screen, their function in the ecosystem and the threats they face, as well as obviously fun making of things. But that X-ray feature, I think, is probably one of the most extensive uses of it in Poacher that Amazon has had. If you do watch it, I invite you to, at the end of an episode, pause and see the data that fed into it.
That is amazing. So there's so much to discover. Yes, sir. Now you want to ask a question?
I'm sorry, I just
Okay.
vaguely remember. Sir, if you're Richie, then why are you so slim? You bother so much. You are so stressed out. I'm sorry.
It's because I work so much.
Well, thank you. I mean, we also have stand-up comedians in the house. A big round of applause for him, please. That was fun. All right, and thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
just feel MIFF, for doing this and for making sure that you have such great sessions, especially when it involves me. I love it. So thank you so much. I'm kidding. Especially when it involves people like Richie who make time
Thank
for
you
it.
very
I think
much.
that's what it's about. And don't forget, Poacher is streaming right now on Prime Video. Richie, thank you for making the time. Thank you so much.
Heartfelt thanks to Ms. Rohini Ramanathan for moderating this captivating session.